Now the molten metal can be poured in.
It's just amazing to think that these processes haven't changed for hundreds of years.
No, it doesn't change.
But the thing is, it still feels
It's still the same.
totally relevant as well.
Very. The same way in 100 years ago, the same way today. The same processes from one stage to another, from one stage to another, is the same process.
And in terms of the relevance, is it still there? Do people still feel these are important?
Very. We have more than 100 and something members of bronzecasters along the streets.
Really?
Walking.
And they still feel...
And the junior ones are still coming up.
Really? And they feel connected to the Ober and the Royal Palace?
Yes.
So those old stories and traditions, they're as important to you as they ever were to your ancestors?
It remains this year, next year, and forever.
Forevermore?
Yeah.
Once the mould is cooled enough, it can be chipped away to leave the metal cast. It strikes me that Ikpong Wusa and his fellow bronze casters have an impressive range of skills. They need to understand pottery, metallurgy, and have artistic ability. And the same skills would have been required 500 years ago to cast the Benin bronzes, something the Victorians could hardly believe.
Oh, I'm beginning to see what it is now. It's hands praying.
It's a prayer hand.
I see.
It's a prayer hand.
A Christian ornament which has been created using a centuries-old technique. For me, these objects don't reach the standards of the 16th century bronzes. But these are for the tourist rather than for the royal palace. Reminders of the quality craftsmanship once commissioned by the king now lie in Benin's City Museum. These are, sadly, mostly replicas of bronzes that were taken from here in 1897. But even so, I'm struck once again by the intricacy of these objects.
It's always the detail that shocks me when I look at these Benin plaques. I mean, the whole thing is very much like a historical document as much as a piece of art. I mean, this is depicting very particular people, and you can imagine them in all of their finery, because you can see it actually depicted here, the detail of the textiles, the layered textiles that they're wearing.
Many bronzes depict 16th century obers, and they are records of specific events, such as military victories which expanded the kingdom.
This, for me, will be Ober Essegy returning from fighting the Agala triumphant with his retinue.
Ober Essegy bolstered the kingdom with the help of the Portuguese, who provided weapons and mercenaries for battles. Many of the plaques were made during his reign. The Portuguese also brought the metal, which enabled the bronze casters to immortalize his exploits. But this craft predates the arrival of the Portuguese, so there must have been another source of copper for the bronzesmiths. And while the bronzes were records of the kingdom's histories, I think they were also more than that. I want to find the origin and meaning of the symbols depicted in them, like this magnificent leopard and the snake which appears on the roof of the Ober's palace. I also want to find out how the culture and technology spread. The answer may lie in West Africa's dynamic and lost civilizations. For 1,000 years before the rise of Benin, West Africa had seen several overlapping kingdoms rise and fall. They had no fixed boundaries or singular ethnic identity. They were held together by the trade routes they sought to control. The 14th century saw one kingdom in particular flourish, the Empire of Mali and its city, Timbuktu. I'm going there to see whether there's any evidence that points to the development of Benin craftsmanship 500 years ago. In the 1300s, Mali was the most powerful kingdom in West Africa. Its emperor, Mansa Musa, was at one time thought to be the richest man in the world, famed for his vast gold reserves and for sending envoys to European courts. Timbuktu's wealth and power came because it was the hub of the lucrative trans-Sahara trade routes. Arab merchants brought goods such as salt, textiles and new metals into West Africa from across the desert. Metals are still worked in Timbuktu's back streets.
Very interesting.
I'm told that in the 14th century the camel trains brought refined copper from North Africa, which made its way south towards Benin. But if this was the source of the bronze cast as metal, I wonder if there are any other hints as to the meaning of the symbols I saw in the plaques. The Arabs didn't just bring goods to this part of Africa, they also brought Islam. It's certainly very different from Benin. I brought a local historian some images of the bronzes.
I have here some images of Benin plaques which are actually in the British Museum. I'm just wondering if looking at these images, if they played any part in the history or the mythologies of Timbuktu.
Vers le nord, c'est très difficile de trouver les bronzes et autres. Parce que l'islam interdit de faire les objets à visage humain. De telle sorte que chez nous, c'est le dessin géométrique, c'est la calligraphie, c'est les poteries. Vous savez que en ce temps en Afrique, c'est l'islam qui a introduit l'écriture. Et quel que soit, on ne peut pas échanger avec les images, avec les sculptures.
Timbuktu's storytelling is owned by teachers and scholars from the libraries and the ancient university, not by guilds of craftsmen. Timbuktu may have been the source of copper for the bronze work further south, but not the imagery, the techniques, or symbolism I've seen. But further south is another important ancient city of West Africa. 220 miles from Timbuktu is the city of Djenné. Perhaps I can find clues there as to how the culture and craftsmanship of Benin may have developed. It lies on a natural thoroughfare, the inland delta of the River Niger. Djenné was established here around 800 AD, 3 centuries before Timbuktu, and 800 years before the Benin bronzes were cast.
This is Djenné. It's one of the great markets of West Africa. And when the market's on, the town here swells to more than 3 times its usual size. This is one of the great spectacles of West Africa.
I've arranged to meet a local historian and guide, Amadou Cissé.
Hello,
good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to Djenné.
Djenné was flourishing by the 13th century, and there has been a thriving market here ever since, overlooked by the great mosque that dominates the city. But it isn't just a local market. Djenné has long been connected with far-flung destinations, and the proof is on the market stalls themselves.
These are beautiful beads.
Yeah, those are the old beads.
These are old. Because I know that there are beads that have been found here that
Yes.
are more than 2,000 years old.
Of course.
That may have come from India or China.
Of course. So they found one bead, another, and they put it together and make them necklace.
At its peak, it was without doubt one of the great markets of West Africa. I mean, the trade from here supported the development not just of the mosque, but of a huge infrastructure across the area. And it drew people from miles around.
Its strategic position as a trading crossroads meant Djenné was contested and conquered by several kingdoms throughout its long history. Yet Djenné has managed to hold on to particularly local traditions. These mud buildings are unlike anything else in West Africa.
I mean, this is a beautiful house.
The architecture of Djenné
Yeah.
is unique in the world. is like...
Amadou says that each architectural feature has meaning. The vertical columns indicate that the owner had 2 wives. There's one pillar at the top for each of his 5 children. This symbolism has more in common with the craftsmanship of Benin, nearly 900 miles away, than to the writing traditions of Timbuktu to the north.
So that was in between the 12th to the 13th century. People are doing a building house on that type of architecture.
Yeah.
Islam forbids representative images. But could this architecture be an outlet for artists here? Every house tells a visual story.
It's a mud building. We have to rebuild our house every year. When there is, for example, because it's a mud building, with the rain season, we lose a part of the wall. When there is some a new birth in our family or somebody died, we change the whole architecture every year.
And so that must mean that there is a whole tradition of masons and of people who preserve and conserve these buildings.
Yes, yes.
Djenné's masons are all from a hereditary guild, just like the bronze casters of Benin. And with their special skills, the masons maintain their old traditions, as well as the ancient beliefs and symbolic codes. Amadou's